Actually will. Okay. Hello everyone and welcome to the Smithsonian Museum. My name is Olivia and this is Campbell. Today we will be your tour guides. If you have any questions at all, feel free to ask.
Today we are going to be exploring early America and the very important 17th century.
Now, I bet you are all curious as to why people even came to America in the first place.
In 1607, Europe was changing drastically.
They were going through economic problems, a huge religious debate. The French had just taken control over England, and it was just absolutely chaotic, and people were looking for a change.
Great thinkers were being born, and people were questioning commonly accepted theories and explanations for how these theories work.
One of these thinkers was Galileo. He is still today considered one of the greatest philosophers of all time. He questioned all of the theories that had been commonly accepted, and he came up with his own. His theories at the time seemed crazy and outrageous to the people, but now we have done more research on his research, and we found out that a lot of his theories are very accurate.
The 1600s was a time for adventure, experiments, and new discoveries.
Now, as most of you know, the first inhabitants of America were the Native Americans.
The particular group that we will discuss today are the Powhatan Indians.
The Powhatan Indians were real people, just like you and me. Some were dumb, some were smart, some were lazy, some were very hardworking, some were fast, some were slow, but they all worked together to work in a great society.
Whoa!
What's happening?
Olivia, what's going on? Oh my gosh. What just happened?
That was the coolest thing ever.
What in the world just happened?
Two Indians just came to talk to us. Like, oh
No.
my goodness, what the heck?
No, that's not real. No.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, the
Oh my
stuff
gosh.
they talked about was so cool.
But they left out some stuff.
They did. You know, we have like a lot planned for you on this tour.
And we need to finish.
They covered a lot of it, but we still have a lot to go. So if y'all don't mind, we're gonna finish our tour because we worked really hard for y'all.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk to you about is the Pilgrims. And when the Pilgrims came to America, they picked a terrible place to live. Like, the place they lived was rocky, the soil was super thin, it was just absolutely terrible. And honestly, the Pilgrims would have died if it was not for the Indians. And I guess the Indians were just too modest, to kind of brag about how they saved the English people. So they were actually a really big deal, and they had a huge impact on the Pilgrims. They taught them how to fish, how to hunt, how to farm. Like, they really taught them how to survive. And the Indians were extremely friendly with the settlers, and they helped them so much. And in 1621, they celebrated their first Thanksgiving, and they had an extremely amazing time, and they had so much food, and usually the Englishmen and the Indians were sort of frugal and didn't throw extravagant balls or anything, but for the Thanksgiving, they went all out.
Quakers. The leaders called the Quakers cursed sects. The name Quaker is used to describe religious people who called themselves Friends. Friends believed that each person has an inner light that leads them to God. People with an inner light do not rely on ministers to tell them what is godly. The inner light is free to everyone, but most Europeans think it is very dangerous, so they don't participate in it. It was reasonable to persecute Quakers, and when they came to New England, they would be whipped, sent away, and even hanged.
The next thing I'm going to tell you about is one of the most terrible times in American history, and it was the Salem witch trials. When the Puritans came to America, they wanted to build the perfect town. They wanted everyone to be constantly reading the Bible, constantly going by what it says, and just be absolutely perfect. And everyone had so much pressure to be perfect. And everybody was considered a spy because they had to watch out for other people because if somebody else was making a mistake, they had to tell on them in order to keep the town perfect. And there was just so much pressure to be exactly perfect and do everything right. But, I mean, the biggest problem was with that is that they were humans, and humans make mistakes, so being perfect was nearly impossible. And there was really no way to avoid mistakes, and so that made it quite difficult to make a perfect town. And at the time, everybody believed in witches. It was just a common belief. And they were absolutely terrified of these witches. And they knew that they had extreme power. And so the witch trials in America all started because two little girls had a nanny named Tituba. And Tituba told them stories about witches and didn't teach them about witches, but she told the kids all of the myths and legends and told the kids all about these witches. And so then the little girls started to act out. They started to make strange noises and behave terribly, speak out during church. And so people were convinced that these little girls were possessed. So they hanged Tituba. She was the first of many to be hanged. Over 1,000 women died because, over 100 women were accused of being witches, and 20 were hanged, as well as 2 dogs.
The Native American and Europeans' ideas about land was very different. The Europeans had lots of land in America, and they couldn't quite process that they had all this land because in Europe, they didn't even have half of this land, and usually only the upper class in Europe could afford and own all the land. The Europeans would cut down the trees, fill in the swamps, and level the hills. They did this because they wanted to confirm their land and show that it was their land and that they were there. The Native Americans' ideas about land ownership were totally different. The Native Americans believed that land, water, and animals all belonged to God and that should not be messed with. They also believed that they needed to live in harmony with nature and that land could be shared. It wasn't owned, so the Native Americans would never own land.
Okay. I'm going to now tell you about one of the most famous Indian tribes. It was called the Wampanoag Indians. And one of the most famous Indians that came out of the Wampanoag tribe was Squanto. I'm sure all of you have heard his name at least once. He spoke very good English because he had been captured and taken back to England and then learned English and all of that, and then he moved back to his hometown. And when he got back to America, he was very, very nice to the Pilgrims. And he was one of the people that taught them how to fish and how to hunt and how to farm. And he really, really helped them survive. And had it not been for them, the Americans would have completely died out.
Now, I know the Indians already told you a lot about a typical town, but they left out a few stuff. The meeting house always stood out in a town. The meeting house was used as more than just one thing. It was used as a church, as a town hall, and as a social center. Now, I know the Indians already told you about that everyone was forming around the green area, but they never explained what the green area was. The green area was the place where all the houses were built around. So every house was built around the green area. Many villages had a stream, and soon stores were added to the town. The stores that were added to a town were a general store, a furniture maker store, a candle maker store, and a blacksmith store. Now, compared to our towns now and then, they have completely changed.
Okay, well, that's all we have for our tour today. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the museum. Bye!
Bye.